innovation. And we are going out for a Bloomberg grant to do this whole concept of the permit process for residential homes as a demonstration project for Bloomberg. And they have X amount of dollars, we, meaning DC, have X amount of dollars left in our original Bloomberg grant. And we're going to go for more money and totally upgrade what is visible for the public for permitting, down to a dashboard that's up at all times that says, well, here's who, here's the plan reviewers who are done, here's who's still outstanding, a big red flashing sign that would literally show up on a person's desktop the next day if they're the last person who hasn't reviewed a project. So this task force out of the mayor's office, we've been literally working on this for 9 months. We got pretty depressed in October and didn't think we were going to get it. And then got pretty excited on a call on Tuesday. So I actually have a whole bunch of questions I need to kind of talk about. And yes, probably sharing my screen would be helpful, actually. So Bloomberg spent X amount of dollars helping Philadelphia put together a permit application process. And there's learning that they like from that and things that they didn't like, and they're looking for other projects. And they have a fairly short, tight process, similar to what I think you guys see when you do work in Fairfax County. I mean, they have a pretty tight submission sheet that you do with your permits. So we hear from the folks in Philadelphia that all their builders and contractors love that sheet, that tight sheet. My question for you is, do you like what you do with Fairfax County on that prep sheet that is essentially the cover sheet for them? Is that good, bad, or indifferent for you?
And Michael, you should be able to share if you try it. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I'll be loving to listen to folks. I got to find it again.
So there's one of the things that's going to happen here, Michael, is most of the people that are going to show up here are the DC people.
Okay.
And so Case for sure works in Fairfax County. The rest of you will have to speak for yourselves.
Yeah. How about Doug? I mean, they're based in Virginia.
We work in Fairfax, but unfortunately, I don't do much with permitting. I don't actually know the answer to that.
Okay, so that's fine.
Michael, we have a whole team of Virginia people, though, that we can put you in touch with. And
yeah, and I'll want that, but I
Yeah.
do want to hear your guys' feedback. Just as Washington, doing work here in Washington. This is the one-page cover sheet that Fairfax County uses for residential permitting. And this is the information they want. The designers are still doing their traditional cover sheets, but this is what drives their inspection process, their plan review process. And the second thing, in terms of the feedback we're getting from the Fairfax County plan review people, they're actually turning out plan review quicker than we are. And we were feeling pretty good about where we were. And they believe that when they went to this kind of a cover sheet, that was their big jump in improvement and performance. So I don't know, just at an initial glance, is this something that you think would be helpful for you for putting everything together that we need and would help us get through the permit process? Because I also want to show you what Denver does, which is very different than this.
I mean, my first question, Michael, would this be electronic? Like, would this be like going into pre-screen?
Mhm.
Would it be electronic?
Yes, it would be
Okay.
electronic and I don't, if you don't have a meeting set for next month, we are actually ready to roll out in the next month or so, but we'll have the test product for a tremendous change in the energy worksheets. That's
Mhm.
much smaller. It's all electronic. You're filling out items, but it's not as onerous as the existing system. And it would probably be a similar system for putting this together. You would just be going, you would log on and first thing would be, well, what's your project name? What's the address? And would just start formulating those things. But, and I don't know which way it's going to flow, right? So we've got the application process, right? And this is for the review process. So if we do the application process first, this sheet will have some of the things automatically filled in. For example, project name, address, how many floors, the occupancy group. I mean, some of these things we have as in the application process that we're pulling from different places in the district anyway. So we would be auto fulfilling some of this stuff for you.
I mean,
Michael,
go
Yeah.
ahead, Dave.
okay, when I think about the way the district is organized with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Environment and lead paint, which is part of them, but all the different department, water department, things like that, I would almost have a section of the form with the information that each one of those departments wants to know so they could determine whether they needed to get involved in this permit or not.
Yes, and we're pretty close at having that. One of the things that's been difficulty is not all of the other agencies want to participate in some of this, especially having it visible if they're the last agency to respond for a permit application. But we were in a meeting Tuesday, I guess yesterday, Tuesday with the mayor's office, and there was a pretty heavy foot put down by somebody who controls all these agency directors that we were going to have them having us all work together. So that was encouraging. And so, for instance, if I take a big step back, complaints that the mayor's office has been getting for some period of time is I do my building permit application. Then I have to do a lead paint application, and some of that's the same information. And then I have to do a stormwater application, and some of that's the same information. Then I have to have public space. And everybody's asking the same thing, like, what's your address? What's the lot numbers? The first step is going to be, and that's expected to finish this summer, is setting up connections, APIs, where once we have an application, we know it's going to have DDOT. They're going to get notified. Here's the information. Billy Bob is doing this project at this address. Here's the tax and lot number. So it auto fills in tops for that basic information. And the other part of it is, if that works right, you as an applicant, as you're going through the basic application for a permit, would get a big screen popping up saying, you need to deal with lead paint issues. Click here if you want to do it now, or click here if you want to do it later. But you have to make an affirmative decision. And it would be, we see it all the time in online online ordering or whatever, where a big screen comes up that says, hey, we need this information from you, or you need to do it. And you can't go forward until you say, I'm either going to do it now or later. we did a survey about, there's a large survey on customer service about permitting. And 75% of the people said they had no idea that there was anything like lead paint regulations. Those are just residents who do their own permitting, which makes sense to me, right? They do it once a lifetime, maybe. They may have heard about it, but it's very few. We have a little blurb in our permit application. If it was building before 1978, that says, hey, you need lead paint, click on here. Except its font is like 8 points. You can't really read it, and you don't know you have to do something. So those kind of things have to pop up. It's the same if you have, what's the biggest holdup for people on public space for residential? They're going to put an awning on the front of their house, and they're going to do bay windows. DDOT requires that they look at that because they consider that public space in most cases on property lines in District of Columbia. People are unaware of that. They have their permit, and before it's being issued, they're getting the stop from DDOT saying, hey, this can't be issued until you come down here and get our public space permit. Oh, by the way, that's running at 45 days. So this whole connection of all the different permitting, first step is, how do we give basic information out to the agencies, and how do we make it a big deal for the customer that you're going to need this? Step one. The long range plan of the mayor's office is that there's only one application for everybody in the city. And, you know, you would go through the application, and if your work is going to require, you know, you're excavating, part of the application would then send you over and say, okay, you're not finished till you go, you know, deal with this stuff over here. And we're not going to accept the application until you finish that part. But that's going to be phase 2 or 3 before we can be that sophisticated.
So Michael, can I interrupt for 1 second? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, please.
Because I think, like, just based on what you're saying, it all sounds great. And as Spectrum, we just had this happen with soil erosion. And it was at the end, after all of the approvals, we got bumped over for a very small garage project. So I think the question that we want to, because all of this sounds perfect, right? I mean, this is exactly what we need. We need, like, who are the agencies up front? Where does this application need to go? Are there any drawings missing right now when we make the application? And I think in the last Zoom, we talked about getting zoning first. I hope that's still in the works as part of this process.
Yes, it is.
It's the same kind of thing. Like, what could we do for the next 6 months, 8 months? Because it's all the same stuff, right? It's like, you and I have talked about this. People file level 1 renovations, but they should be level 2, or they file level 3, but they actually are level 1. And like, what can we do right now to not screw ourselves, pardon my French, but, you know, to not create problems, you know, on whether it's on the cover sheet or the application, like when you fill in additions plus remodeling, like those kinds of things where, like, okay, what is our horizon for this awesomeness? Because I'm sitting here going, you know, ready to break out in, you know, song. But I also wonder, is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it a year? Like, because it all sounds exactly like what we need. So is there some interim things that this group could be doing today that will literally, we can, you know, I think we all know the problems, right? Like, the problems are the interagency, it's the DOEE, these are all the problems, especially getting sent to DOEE at the end, which honestly, that's happened to us 4 times in the last 2 years. Like, oh, we didn't get a DOE approval, and I know we're supposed to know or something. Anyway, I'll be quiet and see what you have to say, what we can do here. Because this all sounds great. Let's keep going and help this tree focus so that we can get permits in 1 to 2 months or so. Thanks.
One, which we're pretty confident we, one, have enough money to do, so we can implement it, is a clear-cut dashboard, rather than making people figure out what Project Docs is telling them about where their project is. And it would be, you would put in the address, and if you had 5 permits, it would be sitting there with the information. It would tell you, here are the outstanding permits, outstanding reviews. Here's where they're at against the SLA. Seems simple. What we found out is the SLAs that we have been working on, DDOT doesn't believe in. So that gets fixed, right? So you'll be able to pull up your permits and see, well, here's the reviews I have against the SLAs. On the management side, on our side, every morning, one of our people, each of our plan reviewers would open up their computer, and they would have a similar dashboard that would tell them, here are your 4 permits that are up against the SLA by 5 days, let's say. So they have visibility. And then I would, as a manager, be getting a countdown of by individual who has things at risk for an SLA. I think that's a huge step forward, and that the folks from the Mayor's Office of Innovation believes we can have that done by end of August, end of September at the latest. They want the end of August because then they can get a pat on the back from Bloomberg, I guess. That we can do right away. The
Michael?
second thing that I think we can do right away. Oh, go ahead, David.
Well, now I forgot, so go ahead.
Well, if you come back with it, I may forget too, and you can fill the void.
Yep.
The second thing, which I believe we can do, I think we can do something as simple as a sheet, just a worksheet. If it has to be by hand, so not try to have it perfect, we can do it by hand, where you as the contractor, design firm, whatever, have an easy form to lay out. Is this an alteration level 1, 2, or 3? Because that has significant impact on what codes get followed. And we during the demonstration of where we think that will go, Brian, our director, said, listen, you're not going to get that by August, Mike. Just put together a piece of paper that people can mark up, make it simple for them to mark it up so that we're all on the same page. And if we're not, that's the first thing that gets fixed, right? So the design professional thinks they're in alteration level 2. We think it's alteration level 3. That's a big deal in terms of—
What's the difference between the two, though?
Pardon me?
What's the difference between 2 and 3? And
Yeah,
suppose you just phrase the
lot of
question
the
a little bit differently. If you're going to rip a wall down, then you're 3 or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
No.
Yeah, so the biggest difference is the application of which codes. And we do a horrible job of that. If you're an alteration level 2, there are a series of energy codes you're required to follow. But if you're an alteration 2 or 1, you don't have to follow those codes. Not all of those codes.
But what triggers them?
Okay. That's the work area issue, right?
Yes.
Because that's what triggers an alteration level 3 or not. You have to have structural changes in more than 50% of the building. Those are the 2 simple rules.
Yeah.
So let's talk
I would just
about—
ask the question like that instead of saying, are you level 2 or 3? Say, are you doing more than 50% of structural? And an answer to that puts them at 3.
Yeah, but what happens is it's not clear what the work area is. So let's take the let's say you're doing a typical row house in the District of Columbia, and there's only two levels habitable. And I'm creating an open floor plan on the main floor. I may be upgrading everything upstairs in terms of the bathroom and the bathrooms and the fixtures, but I'm not changing anything structural. The rooms are essentially the way they were. But on the main floor, I'm tearing down a wall between the dining room and the kitchen, and I'm tearing down a wall between the kitchen and dining room. If I leave those three spaces doing exactly how they were before, but I just remove the walls, the workspace is very small because the workspace is only those walls you took down. But if I take down the living room wall and the living room stays in its same place in terms of square footage, but after I do the kitchen wall and I move the kitchen all the way to the dining room because I'm going to use those two rooms for my kitchen and blend in the seating, I now am using those two pieces. So suddenly, if it's a 600 square foot main floor, I've got 200 square feet staying one way, and I've got 400 going to the work area. So for that floor, I'm more than 50%. But I'm also doing work upstairs, but I'm not doing any reconfiguration. I'm below 50% for the total work area. We see, I had Lamont, one of my guys, go through 25 plan sets for remodels in homes. In half of them, the folks treated it like a level 3 because they were doing open concept. But when you sit down and do the work area, they didn't have to go to a level 3. They weren't. So there was a difference in the energy codes. There's some things you don't have to do for the plumbing and mechanical codes. It makes a difference in the work that's required. Now, your client may very well want to do a lot of that stuff, so be it. But we don't want to put people in a position where they have to do something. And I think it's, for me, I see it as kind of an economic development piece. Things are more expensive today than ever before. And if we are not communicating what is required clearly, people are going to spend more money than maybe they have to. They can make decisions about how they want to spend that money. Maybe they'll end up doing the work because they don't have to follow all the energy codes because it's alteration level 2 instead of 3. And they actually go ahead and do the work.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy as a person who does a lot of his own work in his life and had a construction company as well, that people were paying for things that weren't necessary. And if it's my fault, it really killed me. If it was a bad plan review, that bothered me too. But I think we sometimes get in the way because of the complexity of the code on some things that would be money savers and time savers.
Hey, Michael, I think that this probably deserves a few more minutes. And so maybe as you're a member of your subcommittee for code, I can kind of talk about this because I do think it's super important, and I don't think that the group really understands the significance of what's happening with that level 1, level 2, level 3. And then maybe I'll speak as just the contractor, and if you want to correct or any other code geek wants to correct, but I think it is worth people fully understanding that the level 3 versus a level 1 in kind of real simplistic. I mean, it's not simple, but it really routes your permits quite differently. It routes your permit fees quite differently. It routes your reviews quite differently. And I think Michael hit on these things, but basically a level 1 renovation is a kitchen remodel, no matter what you do to it. A bathroom remodel, no matter what you do to it. interior design, that's all, if you choose to, if it requires a permit, that's all level 1, and that just routes you super simple. You've got to do that work to code inside this subset of the whole house. Let's just jump to level 3. As soon as you jump to level 3, you actually, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, you need to bring the house up to code, which involves code, energy code, mechanical, electrical, envelope, et cetera, et cetera. And if you have code violations that you can't fix, you've got to then go backwards and get your code exemptions for stairs or egress, or if you've got a historic house and you can't change an exit from a basement, that's a code exemption. So you kind of got to work backwards, but the area of work is more than 50%, right, Michael? For level 3, and that's of the whole house.
Of the whole house.
Yep.
You only have to upgrade those places you touch. But this
Correct.
concept of what the work area is, I can go out and talk to my folks. And people will say, oh, they took down the wall between the dining room and kitchen, and they took down the wall between the dining room and living room. That work area is that entire floor. So all those walls have to meet the new energy code. No, that's not the work.
Correct.
And we make mistakes on that. I can't tell you how many architects make mistakes on that. And I think part of it is it's a tough concept. It becomes a bigger issue, Keith, and you're headed there, is with the new code cycles. Because, we have legislation in the District of Columbia that energy standards are going to be required for anything that's substantial improvement and new build. Well, substantial improvement is 50% of the building. And, we got to get people off of doing that. And it costs money. I mean, it is really about money in so many ways.
I like the
harder.
Yeah, I like the example, if I'm remembering correctly, from one of our committee meetings, where if you're upgrading an electric panel that's in a basement or laundry room or utility room, and you're running wires to your new renovation, the whole area of work is not where you're running the wires.
No.
Like that area of work is where you're putting in the electric panel and then your area of work. You don't need to, just because you're walking through it or running a wire through it, you do not need to claim that as your area of work. So if you misclaim your area of work, you will get bumped to 2 and 3, which intensifies your code compliance. Is that a good way to say it, Michael?
Yeah, and I think the best example I saw in the group that we just walked through, somebody was doing an interior renovation of the whole house, but the bathrooms were where the bathrooms were, the kitchen was where the kitchen was, but they took down all the plaster walls. They wanted drywall, and they had reason they needed to. Guess what? That's an alteration level 1. They didn't reconfigure anything. They just took down the walls. And in that case, it's about 4 feet by 8 feet. 4 inches by 8 feet of what the workspace is. It's really nominal. Even though you've torn out every single plaster wall in the house. It stayed at alteration level 1. The other part, that if we can get to these alteration levels down and we feel comfortable, you feel comfortable, we're feeling comfortable, we need to introduce another level of plan review time frames. So alteration level 1, I'm trading out my bathroom, I'm redoing my kitchen, whatever. Small things, those we need to flip in 2 or 3 days. If you're doing an entire renovation of your house, but you're not changing structural walls, we need to get those out in 5 days. Because it should be that simple. And if we can start getting the alteration levels understood by everybody, that's how we can trigger, automatically saying, hey, this is an alteration level 1, we're gonna get this out in 2 days. Rather than having people, there's 7 people over here who look at every application. We gotta be able to automate that, and take them as plan reviewers. But that's, that will be real life, how getting this alteration level and work plan down. Can we do it automatedly? Yes, someday. But I'm pretty content if I put together I think I can do it in a 1-pager. You fill it out, you draw what you're doing, and you'll know, is it alteration level 1, 2, or 3? And it's not pretty, but it gets us what we want rather quickly. Would that work for you guys?
Yes, Michael, this is Gracie with Case
Nice to see you.
Architects. So we have adopted a practice of putting a lot of this information on our cover sheet, which is described in this cover sheet that Fairfax uses. From my experience, some of the problems that we got into before adding details like the alteration levels is that your reviewers didn't like us determining the level. We would, file for an application level 1, and they would come back to say, change it. You have to go back and recorrect it because this is a level 2 based on their interpretation. The good side, though, is, in terms of what Keith was talking about, where they would miss something like DOEE, we would put on the cover sheet disturbing less than 50 square feet. There would be instances where, the reviewer would look at, whatever, let's say 400 square feet addition. Maybe it's an odd story. We're not disturbing, or adding any additional footprint. But they would look at that and assume that it has to go through the review. So we would get a comment, and then would have to respond again to the comment saying, hey, disturbing less than 50 square feet. Then they would say, okay, sorry about that. It would go through the cycle, and then they would apply non-applicable. So there are pluses and, pros and cons to it. If we have to determine the levels, I could see where the interpretations would be, like which I believe you described earlier. The conflict of them thinking, no, the fact that you changed all the drywall, and looking at the scope, you've gone outside that range, and you need to fulfill or be placed under level 3, for instance. So I could see the cover sheet helping to get through pre-screen, but then how it expedites the process as it goes through different disciplines, trying to figure out how you all will implement that.
Yeah, okay. So one, I understand this concept that you get, you as a design professional or design build firm, you're saying this is an alteration level 1, and then plan review looks at it and says, no, I'm going to HSC this is an alteration level 2. In many cases, it doesn't actually matter between those two, right? So is it a fight worth having? That's what I have to teach people. But you need to, if you need to be able to start and say, this is an alteration level 2. And now I'm going to go into the existing building code, and here's the things I have to comply with for an alteration level 2. It's a shorter checklist than if it's an alteration level 3. And are we at times going to challenge that? Absolutely. But most of the time, call me naive, if we have a sheet that we all agree on, if you put in the wrong number, I should be able to say, hey, I see that you put in 8.5 feet, and that was actually 18.5 feet. That happens, right? And that changes everything. But you need to be able to not have to say, well, I'm always going to treat remodels as an alteration level 3. I mean, Keith, you brought up about stairways in existing homes. Nothing drives me crazier than people thinking they have to adjust these stairways stairs in existing buildings, because the existing building code allows an exception for an existing building. And, I don't know how much money we get because people are filing code mods for something that we don't need a code mod on.
Hmm.
But it slows down you folks, it slows us down, it slows everybody down. And
About $300 to get a
yes,
code modification.
so is it gonna be an easy transition? No. I've been working with my team with 10 on what is the work area for about 4 months now. And they're still at every week when I say, okay, we're pulling these 3 out, we're gonna look at these work areas. It's still an hour conversation on some of these. And I think the only way we're going to get that better is to involve you folks in saying what you believe it is, but 2, as we come up with things that we've learned, that we publish them, which is another change with Brian Hanlon, our new director, and Nicole Rogers, our new chief building official, is we're going to publish a lot of stuff. So I've got I've published how we handle. Big thing is if you're legalizing your building to have to have an apartment in it. We probably see 10 of those a week. Somebody had it illegal, the new person bought it, they want to be legal, and now they find out they never had a permit. So we set it up that if that's your case, you want to take an existing apartment and you want to make it legal, we only want to see 10 things. Period. If it's existing, you need to show me fire separation, separate shut off for water, separate shut off for electric. It's fairly clear what we want. We should publish that. It shouldn't be a surprise or somebody trying to figure out what they're submitting, or they submit an as-is plan and we're telling them, hey, sorry, Charlie, you're going to have to put in a fire-rated ceiling in that basement or up the stairwell or a fire-rated door.
If you did that and had a checklist for those items that we could even put on the plan and show them checked off so that it's very clear, and then it'll help us do it right the first time.
Yeah.
And since I got you for a minute, as Crazy was talking, it really struck me that so many of these problems are related to communication and getting back to people. And the lead paint people are notorious for the way they respond to things. If they would just pick up the phone or send an email or something like that, especially when they're asking something stupid, that would speed things along. And here's my brainstorm of an idea. If you're going to build this dashboard, put a chat feature in it and train people to use it.
A check feature?
A chat feature, yeah. Chat, C-H-A-T.
Oh, chat.
Chat.
That's like, what, you're going to pay me? I'm all for it. Yeah, a chat feature.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I have this dashboard open on my computer all day, and I know I got something in Plan Reviewer, and the guy has a question, he'd say, oh, David's online, let me just.
Yeah. Well, what I want to do better is have, and we're developing two people who will full-time be our chat folks. And when the chat comes in, they don't know the answer. They're going to stand up and walk over to the person who's got the answer and come back, rather than this bouncing around of people to chat. But we digress there. Yes, I think that's absolutely important to have the communication increase. And the other part of the increased communication is we are going to start releasing that kind of information. The first one I want to release, if you are going to legalize your apartment, here's what you're going to have to do. Period. It's easy. People know what it is. I made that presentation of those 10 items to real estate agents last month. Yes, that's a couple of weeks ago, last month. They were shocked that they had even a little responsibility to say to somebody, hey, that's not a legal apartment and you have to have a license to do it. But here's all you have to do to make it legal. Because most people want to be legal. most people. So it needs to be simple, but they get afraid. If we publish, the other thing I learned if we publish that is, there are folks who charge large sums of money for generating one plan sheets. Well, the other part of it is, here's how you can draw your own dang plan sheet if you want, fairly simple for that homeowner who wants to do their own work. But it shouldn't have to be tons of pages for you folks either, right? And if it's those 10 items and you got them, we did a sample and I had the folks over at Will Tays do it. They took what was typically 3 pages for them to legalize an apartment, and they put it all on 1 page. They filled everything they needed for us to prove it. It was easy enough for the contractor to do the work. And that got turned in 1 day. Why should it take 5 days? Because, we have 2 second apartment that we're going to legalize. We want to legalize things in the district. But it's going to be, we're going to start publishing. We're going to have a warehouse of them. I've got a fairly extensive written guidance for when you do take a single family home and convert it to a second apartment. Another thing that causes people problems is when they create an apartment above a garage, because that always triggers the alteration level 3, because you're doing the entire, second floor of the garage, but you're also putting a stairway up to it, and that triggers over 50% every time. But if everybody knows going in what it is, have at it. That then triggers a sprinkler in that particular garage. We have sprinklers, people being surprised when they have to put in sprinklers. And it's usually in garages. We have people putting sprinklers in basements when they're not necessary. So, it's.
Michael, what you're talking about are the building blocks for automating the system. I mean, once you have those checklists established, then you can, put a connection to each one of them to route it to DOT or the lead paint people or something. But you've got to have that all listed out in that form that you're talking about. So.
Well, and I'll put this Denver one in the chat. You guys can look at it. I mean, it's 31 pages. But you're right, David. In the long run, if we do this correctly, we should be able to get to the point where, and certainly I've talked to, I think, both you and Keith, we should be in the position where here's the things you need to submit for this kind of project. If you did, and you're a designer or design build firm in good standing, it's an automatic issuance. It's going to have no reviews. Now, once you get, you start doing bad work, then you're going to come back to it. But we ought to be able to take more permits in auto issuance. You're going to do a deck and you use the deck guide. I don't know why we look at it, except zoning wants to. So we figure out how to get zoning out of the way first. But if you're using the deck guide for a deck in your backyard that's 2 feet off of the ground, I don't even want to, we shouldn't even waste our time. Let the inspections verify that you did it right. So get that out the door. Fencing, I mean, we physically have to do stuff for fencing that we don't even look at, right? If we have this done right, can we auto submit those? But is that possible? Absolutely. And, there's folks, AI, who knows when that happens, but these are all the first steps to that, but simple, not glamorous.
When you start developing this, who does the technology side of this? Does the Department of Buildings have their little office of tech guys, and does DOT have a separate little office with 2 guys in it, or is there one central place?
Yes, no, and absolutely maybe. So we don't have tech design people. So when we put together the permit wizard, we hired a tech firm that develops software. This work that we're talking about doing with Bloomberg, the work would be done by Octo, the larger IT component of the District of Columbia. And in large part, that is because the people who really run the city, want to get things on the same base, right?
Yeah,
If we're doing something in the District of Columbia, here's the rules we follow, and Octo can make sure it happens. That's the office of something other in technology.
well, maybe that'll reduce some of the animosity between the departments. If
It
there's,
sure could. I mean, a perfect example of that, this working group, we had all the agencies show what their application process was. And we went first since I'm the chair of the group, and I figured, I'll take the first meetings from everybody, and we did that. The last people to go was DDOT, and they said, well, we're better than all you people because our top system is perfect. Anybody who's dealt with tops, do you agree? No. And then the Octo people are like, what the heck are you even using that platform for? We got to get you out of it. So you're absolutely right, David. We need to have similar platforms so that we can move across as agencies and have one place to go get a permit. You want a driver's license, you should go to the same place.
well, if the mayor's telling you all to work together and there's one group that's doing all the developing, then it's just a matter of herding all these cats.
Well, that's their job.
Yeah,
But we can do small things. So if you guys don't have a problem with a paper submittal that says, here's what we need for the work area, because I think that's a good first step. I'm willing to do it on the residential side. It makes a lot of sense.
all those things you said made sense, and I, work a little bit harder and crank them all out. Now,
Yeah, well, the nice thing is Brian, he's not a technology guy, so he has no problem with things being on paper as we try and figure it out and let the beauty come later.
but the people that meet with the customers are our salespeople, and we need to have these tools for them. So when they say, I want to convert my garage into an apartment, they can give them an accurate description of what's needed. And very foggy area.
It is a foggy area. I mean, we can spend we literally can spend hours on end talking about what is the work area. But if we put it in writing and we issue it publicly, that changes the conversation. And Garrett just was not, he did not believe in putting that kind of stuff publicly out there because he thought we'd be held to accountable.
Eric, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. I just, following up on, having this beautiful new system and tech and so forth. I think a real critical component is rolling that out and testing it, perhaps with, trusted contractors like us or architects around the city and so forth that can kind of vet the system before you throw it out there. I think DC has a bad reputation of building something that they think is the best in the world, and then they put it out there, and we all struggle for a year and a half until it gets changed. And that, the intention is obviously good, but the result is a lot of pain. I think that's one component. The other thing is when we make updates to that system going further into the future, that we do it conscientiously at certain milestones, whether it's every 12 months annually, but not every month, put out a different button. So every time you're filling out a permit, it's different, because that's what's going on now with all the different reviewers and the agencies and so forth, is that every single permit is different. Every single one. We try to make cheat sheets. We try to make a list of items to hit. And then every reviewer also sees it a little bit different, even within the same discipline, right?
Mhm.
So that would be my comment. I think that generally speaking, to the other comment I would make is that reviewers like to just pitch it back. And I don't know how to get rid of that other than to get rid of the reviewers and, get better reviewers. But generally speaking, they like to throw a comment back on day 30, and then it doesn't even apply, but now we're into another 15-day cycle. And at the end, and they'll wait till that 15th day. And now we're literally sometimes 3 months, because those are business days. And as we know, that's not calendar days. So sometimes this happened to us recently. We were 3 months into a project where it should have been your 2 or 3 day permit turnaround. They were asking for a plat, and there was no exterior work. It was under, so many square feet inside. Anyway, I won't belabor the point. You get the idea.
No, I absolutely know that idea. And, as a manager of time and people, it drives me crazy here too. It's like, we just did something that's going to take us how much time to get it done later? I mean, everybody loses. And, so I am now over all of the permitting services. So I'm the new deputy chief building official. And one of the messages I'm trying to communicate to everybody is that, and it's a communication that the director and I share, we actually are a significant part of the economic engine of this city, of this district. And, everybody loves these glamorous projects like the wharf and what's going on at Navy Yard. But if you think about residential buildings and remodeling, that touches so many different people. One, the folks who live in the house get to have something better and feel good about it. But there are small business people all over making money, able to make a little bit of money and put food on the table and put it back into the economy. Most residential work in the District of Columbia, there's not $1 spent by the customer doing the work that doesn't stay in the District of Columbia once, twice, 3 times. It just keeps coming back for us. And, I don't know how your businesses are going, but we're seeing a significant fall off on construction permits right now. And it's cost in many cases, right? And the cost of money. So if we make it difficult for that money to get in the system and be flowing through, we're hurting this district. And I think we have to think that way. I don't want to kill people. I mean, that's my first rule. But I also don't want to kill people with over-regulating and going after something that means nothing. Those are the ones that drive me nuts.
Yeah, I've honestly been saying that for many years, that the process and sometimes the fees, but usually the process is driving people away from DC. One of the reasons I got into the business was to keep people in DC, to make it more livable in their own spaces. And it still happens on as I meet with potential clients. They talk about the timeframes that things need to go through, and the hoops and the fees associated with what they might want to do. In some cases, it's relatively small. And I am seeing people leave. They're moving out of the district because of that. That the choices are, do they do this or do they just move? Obviously, there's other factors, but that's a big one from my perspective, right? From our industry.
I'm with you on that. And, and so I want our folks here to understand our work is important, keeping people safe, but our work is also important by keeping people in town and being able to stay here and to age in place. And this whole 10-point thing for, either legalizing your to legalize your basement apartment, all came about from a community meeting I had with the Aging in Place Task Force. And these folks, they've been living in these homes their entire lives, and they're getting priced out because they can't pay their tax bill. Because they're, what was one lady, I mean, she said, listen, I have $1 million property, but I don't have that same kind of income. I'm living off of Social Security, but I have $1 million property because I was smart enough to buy on Capitol Hill and paid $15,000 for it in 1945. But I'm not $1 million person. My kids will have that. But I can't stay there. And I kept hearing that story again and again on the same task force. And so I asked the question, why? Well, to make an apartment so I can rent it, to get licensed, I want to be safe, my insurance company requires it. It's going to cost me $100,000 to remodel my basement.
Yeah.
Well, depends on where you live. If you're in, Keith, I saw the 200,000. But my point for folks is if I got that Capitol Hill space and I'm going to create a legal apartment in the basement, I know I can grab $3,000 in rent, maybe 4, depending where you're sitting. Yeah, I can afford to do $200,000 in remodeling. But if I'm the person who owns the house that's worth $400,000 today, and it's in Anacostia, and I'm going to be able to rent that basement for $800. I have to figure out how to make that basement apartment work for $20,000, $30,000, maybe $40,000. Otherwise, it doesn't work, and somebody gets forced out of their house. And by trying to crystallize what is necessary versus what is nice, it's two different things. So that's where that 10-point thing came from. Because you guys all know how many of these row houses have illegal apartments in them.
I went in one last week.
All the time.
Architect and contractor said they did not need a permit to put in a basement apartment.
Of course they didn't.
So,
but so yeah, we have to make it simpler. We've got to keep people in the district, and the people who are getting checked out are the ones who can't afford to do the big numbers.
So Michael, we're running up against the 3 o'clock window. Sorry. This has been great. Thank you. I think where we're leaving it is there's some kind of cover sheet coming to us.
Well, what I want to do first is I want to be able to publish what is the work area and how you come up with alteration level 1, 2, or 3. It's not going to be glamorous. We're going to have to do it on paper. It's going to have to be, here, sketch it out. And here's how we do the math. Which then allows us to get it pretty some other day because it becomes a work product. But I'd like to be sending that to you folks to take a look at and give me feedback on.
Definitely.
Are there documents like that for ADUs? And I mean, is there some library of stuff?
There are.
Dave is always going to like the Taj Mahal and the Mount Everest of problems. I mean,
You can go to the Montgomery County website and get an ADU guideline. That'll be a good.
Well, there's a lot of them around.
Yeah.
Because I've got them all.
Yeah.
I want to do work area and alteration level first. The second thing I really want to set on is I'm legalizing apartment in my house because I want to get licensed. Okay, here's 10 things you need to do for that. It's an existing apartment. It's always been, it's been there for as long as you remember, and you want to make it legal. Here's the 10 things. I think those are, as we incrementally go through things, those are 2 of the things I'd like to do quickly. And we can do those on paper. The third thing that we're actually working on writing out already is what code you follow. Based on what you're doing to a row house. Because if you have a row house going to a 2-family, you're stuck in IBC. The good news is in the next code cycle, whenever it gets released, we're treating row houses 2-family just like a detached 2-family. It's both going to be in the IRC, because there really should be no penalty for being a row house. The fire
When is that,
separation, big deal.
When is that coming out, Michael?
I suspect it will be out end of 2024 or the first quarter of 2025.
Michael, remember we spent
Thanks.
3 or 4 meetings defining this row house, townhouse situation, at
Mhm.
least. It was excruciating.
It was excruciating, and then what's really fun, Keith, you'll appreciate this. We were submitting it, and one of my assistants who aren't involved in this kind of thinking, she's like, "Why are you wording it so hard?" Show you how to write a definition that's a little clearer for people.
Yeah.
And I sent it up to the lawyers, and they're like, "Yeah, that's cool."
Yeah.
How it goes.
So can we make a quick ask, Michael, which is something I heard in this meeting from Eric, and Spectrum certainly have it, and I know others have. Could we get some kind of reverse administrative commitment for like routing interagency, getting comments on day 30 when even worse, the information is already there. And we've been pushed into another cycle, like something where we can get something, especially if applications are down. I went out to the Montgomery County thing, Dave was there, a few others, and they were down as well, even though the guy's like, no, it's the same. And I'm like looking at the numbers, they're like 15% down. Can we get something in reverse for us, like that would really give us something that we could actually do, or a person that we could actually call when worst case scenario, day 30, hey, we need this. And it's actually on drawing, A14 or whatever, or I don't know where I'm making it up. You see what I mean? Like that's the
No, I do.
worst scenario. And we've got no repercussions. And then, like I said, DOEE or whatever happens at the very end, and it's like, well, wait a minute, something that tells the applicant what to do, because the applicant is not always the top of the food chain per se, that knows the nuances, so to speak. Anyway, just an ask. I don't know if I think it's clear to me in my head. I may not have articulated it very clearly.
No, I know, I have a sense of what you're talking about, and part of the solution that our new deputy director, Caroline Leon, is trying to implement is that the customer service people, rather than working for the customer service manager, works for the individual programs. So like there's 2 people doing, there's 8 people in customer service. Well, 2 of them will be working for me full-time outside my door, and they will always answer the questions or track down the problems. Hopefully that gives us some help there. The second thing is it's just going to take more and more leverage coming out of the mayor's office that other people act. And one of the things that Brian is going to a meeting with the other directors, we should not hold up any review because of DDOT. You got your own damn permits. Why why let us be the ones that have to be your gatekeepers? Let's not slow down people. I feel the same way about DOEE. That one I didn't get as much positive feedback, but I don't see any problem in having the permit be issued and say, hey, this home was built before 1978. You need to follow lead paint standards. Here's where you go. And make it incumbent then upon the homeowner and the contractor and designers to make sure they follow lead paint rather than making it go through a review process to get a building permit to do work.
Okay.
I think those are some things that I think that group out of the mayor's office will push.
Keith?
Yeah.
Eric had one more question. Eric, do you want to ask it or do you want me to read it from the chat?
Is
And
this
those
the
need to jump
backup
off.
one?
Yes.
Oh.
Ah,
Got you, stumped you, huh? So let me cut to the chase on that one. Here's the
Eric,
issue.
I already sent it to Michael.
Okay,
He may
but
not remember, but let's have at it.
it
'Cause
sounds
this is great.
like he does, but the real trick here is that, you know, final payments for projects as well as closing out bank loans, construction bank loans are all tied to those final inspections. And we had a project recently that went another 6 months beyond final inspection. And both of those could not be closed out. You know, we have no control over Pepco, obviously, and so I don't know why that was recently changed, that final inspections have to wait for the Pepco upgrade when it's technically outside the house, outside of the property, and no, it doesn't affect anything from the meter service end. So anyway, that's my
Is
gripe.
it our
I think
final
it's-
inspection?
Yes. Yes.
Because I know Pepco's a problem and that's a whole different issue. I'll find out. I don't know why that. I don't know. I thought that got fixed. I'll find out.
Yeah, they're not doing final inspections completely final until the Pepco service is upgraded. And this was just recently in the last 6 months. And so obviously that just delays any movement forward.
Yeah,
But that should only be the inspection for the electrical permit that gets pulled and not the whole building permit.
You can't get a
Yeah,
final.
we've done our
until-
part.
Yeah, you can't get a final until the electrical permit is finalized.
No,
So-
yeah, I follow you.
Yep.
Don't drive me crazy.
yeah, and it's sort of the same thing going back to the changes and the progress and actually having some milestones. Like if and when there's going to be a change like that, can we get some guidance that this is happening, or like the rules just changed? You know, Eric's like, all my permits have different reviewers, different application rules, different application of code. It's really difficult to kind of on the fly, like we can use the wall check and close in, for example. It was on the books, Michael, probably before you were around. That was a rule on the books. But then it was never enforced. And then all of a sudden, you're in the middle of 2 or 3 projects and it gets enforced. And so some of us knew about the rule and some of us didn't. And it's that
Yeah.
kind of thing where if there's guidance, then people might just go ahead and actually do it correctly.
Yeah.
And
That's a good example, Keith. I think that the wall check really snagged us on 4 different projects at the same time.
3
Um,
for us.
Yeah, and you know, it was just a backlog. Unfortunately, we also had a reviewer not review one for 6 months after it was into zoning. So that was a duplicated effect. But in terms of the Pepco thing, just kind of going back to that, in all these issues, really, the larger problem too is that we're looking like we're not the professionals, because the clients are looking at us and saying, well, why didn't you know this? And that's a real problem, especially when you're trying to final a project out and you're trying to get out of there and they're looking at you like, well, we hired you because you're the professional.
Yeah,
And it's very damaging.
are you still having problems getting the wall checks? I mean,
No. Now that we know the rules, we get them done at ASAP as soon as we come out of the corners. But it was a regulation, but never enforced, that you had to have that wall check on file before you could get your close-in inspections. And then all of a sudden, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they just started enforcing it. And so I think what Eric and I are saying is it was like all of a sudden, it's not that you didn't know you had to have it before your final inspection. It was the timing of it. And so, you know, someone like Eric gets to the end of a project and it's like, oh, I can't get my electrical final because of Pepco, can't get a final, bank can't get no one can close a loan, costs many, many tens of thousands of dollars to the homeowner. I mean, you know, that's the kind of thing where, and then we look dumb, right? Like I told somebody we had a permit ready for issuance, and then suddenly we're kicked back over to DOE. Like, and it's like, well, don't you know what you're doing? It's like most days, just not on Thursdays, right after Christmas.
With the wall check, it's certainly it's certainly working a little bit better. But you know, we were being penalized for the slowness of the process as well. Like a lot of the times we had to wait for it to get signed before we could move forward. And
You still do.
we did all our work up front. And just this past May 5th to be exact, because I remember, you know, the reviewer didn't see it and didn't look at it, and we called and this and that. You know, we have 3 different people calling it 3 different times every day, and it still took until September to get that wall check approved. That's a real story, and that's really for a client that was pregnant was not a happy day.
How much of that is a review issue versus an inspection issue? And do the inspectors fall under you, Michael? And
No,
no, they don't fall under you?
inspections does not.
So, I mean, like deciding to enforce the wall check, is that a plan review issue, or is that some inspector said we need to do this?
Wall check is a zoning issue.
Zoning.
But I don't understand why there's that delay, because a lot of these people are the same inspector.
And it's, you know, wall checks have to be done by a certified list from DC. So if they lie on it, like they can lose their license. Like those are pretty, you know, pretty accurate drawings. Anyway, there's lots of these little interagency nuances that make it hard for us. That's, I think, you know, and we're here today, thanks everyone, to make it easier and better and work together and like get it organized. Because Eric and my story are very similar. We started to keep people and families in the district, and they're leaving. Some of my first clients are leaving, and they're going to Virginia, or they're going outside of our service territory, and that's frustrating because you spend time building your fans, your fan base, and then suddenly, you know, you're not going to go work in Reston. You might refer them to a nice company out in Reston, but that's as far as that goes. So,
I've had
and I
two
do see people leave.
customers.
Go
I've
ahead.
had 2 customers move out too, but they moved out because of crime.
Okay, it's been lovely talking to all you people.
Yeah.
It's always lovely. I am actually late for a meeting with McDonald's.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Michael, thank you
Thank
so
everyone.
much. This was
Thank everyone for joining us.
So I'll send a worksheet for you guys to start practicing with and give me some feedback.
This was the
Great.
best meeting yet.
Because you guys.
Because you were the first one. This is your first meeting, huh? Or you're in charge.
He's had 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Hey,
you so
talk
much.
to y'all
everybody.
later.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great job.